I am Neil Armstrong. On July 20th, 1969, I became the first human being to set foot on another world. That day forever changed not just my life, but the course of human history itself. The morning began like any other day in space, though we all knew it would be anything but ordinary. Buzz Aldrin and I woke up inside the lunar module Eagle, while Michael Collins remained in the command module Columbia. After a quick breakfast, we began the intricate process of preparing for what we hoped would be humanity's first lunar landing. I want to be completely honest. I estimated our chances of a successful touchdown on the moon surface to be about 50-50. Most people don't realize how difficult this mission truly was. We were attempting something that had never been done before, with technology that, while revolutionary for its time, was primitive by today's standards. The separation from Columbia went smoothly. As we undocked, Mike Collins observed from Columbia, "I think you've got a fine-looking flying machine there, Eagle, despite the fact you're upside down." I remember replying, "Somebody's upside down." It was a moment of levity before the real work began. The powered descent to the lunar surface was when things got interesting. At the beginning of our descent burn, everything seemed nominal. The descent propulsion system fired at 10% thrust for 26 seconds before increasing to full power. We were about 300 miles east of our target landing site in the Sea of Tranquility, flying engine first with our windows facing down toward the moon's surface. Then the computer alarm started. First came the 12:02 alarm. My heart rate definitely spiked. Any pilot will tell you that unexpected alarms during a critical phase of flight get your attention immediately. Houston quickly came back with, "We're go on that alarm," but it certainly added to the tension of an already demanding situation. As we descended, I was tracking landmarks against predicted times, and I could tell we were running about 2 to 3 seconds early. This meant we would land roughly 3 miles downrange from our planned touchdown point. I was proved correct in this prediction. At 40,000 feet altitude, I maneuvered Eagle to a windows-up orientation in preparation for the pitch-over maneuver. This positioned our windows forward in the direction of flight and allowed our landing radar to see the lunar surface. The radar would be crucial for the final approach. When we pitched over and I could see our actual landing site through the windows, my concerns about our trajectory proved justified. We were heading directly toward a boulder field, rocks the size of Volkswagens scattered everywhere. It was clear that an automated landing in that area would be impossible. I switched to manual control. This was a decision I had practiced countless times in simulations, but doing it for real, with fuel running dangerously low, was entirely different. Buzz was calling out our altitude and fuel status. 60 feet, down 2, 2 forward, 40 feet, down 2.5, 30 feet, 2.5 down, picking up some dust. The dust being kicked up by our engine was starting to obscure our view of the surface. We were essentially landing blind, using only our instruments in Buzz's altitude callouts. The fuel situation was becoming critical. We had perhaps 30 seconds of fuel remaining when I finally saw a suitable landing spot and set Eagle down. "Contact light," Buzz called out as our probe made contact with the lunar surface. I immediately shut down the engine and radioed to Houston those famous words, "The Eagle has landed." The relief in mission control was palpable, even across the 250,000 miles of space. But for Buzz and me, this was just the beginning. We still had to prepare for our moonwalk, and we were ahead of schedule by about 5 hours. The preparations for our extravehicular activity took several hours. We had to check all our systems, don our portable life support systems, and go through extensive checklists. NASA had learned from previous missions that rushing could lead to mistakes, and this was not the time for errors. When I finally opened Eagle's forward hatch, the moment felt surreal. The hatch swung inward toward Buzz, giving me access to what we called the front porch. As I squeezed through the narrow confines of the hatch and onto the ladder, Buzz helped guide me through the process. One of my first tasks was to pull a lanyard that deployed the modularized equipment stowage assembly on the side of Eagle's descent stage. This deployed our television camera, allowing hundreds of millions of people back on Earth to watch as I descended the ladder. I was aware that the world was watching, but in that moment, I was focused entirely on the task at hand. As I reached the bottom of the ladder, I found myself standing on Eagle's footpad, about 3 feet above the lunar surface. As a precaution, I practiced jumping back up to the ladder's first rung. This would be our escape route if something went wrong during our surface operations. The 1/6 lunar gravity made this much easier than it would have been on Earth. From the footpad, I could see that Eagle had settled into the lunar dust much less than we had expected. The footpads had only penetrated 1 or 2 inches into the surface material. I described what I was seeing to Houston. The surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. And then came the moment that would be remembered forever. At 10:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, I stepped off the footpad and placed my left foot on the lunar surface. The sensation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My foot sank only slightly into the fine, powdery material. It was at this moment that I spoke the words I had been contemplating during our approach. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. I had intended to say a man, but in the excitement of the moment and the limitations of our communication system, the article was either dropped or not clearly transmitted. The intended meaning, however, was clear. This step represented the achievement of all humanity, not just one individual. The texture of the lunar surface was fascinating. The dust was incredibly fine, almost like powder, but it adhered strongly to everything it touched. It stuck to our boots, our gloves, and any equipment we placed on the surface. Unlike anything we had on Earth, this material had been undisturbed for millions of years. 19 minutes later, Buzz joined me on the surface. His first words upon seeing the lunar landscape were particularly poetic. Beautiful view. Beautiful, beautiful. Magnificent desolation. Those words perfectly captured the contradiction of our surroundings. Stunningly beautiful, yet utterly barren. Moving around in the reduced gravity was an experience I will never forget. Every step felt like we were moving in slow motion. We could take longer strides than on Earth, and when we fell, which happened to both of us occasionally, it was a gentle, floating fall rather than a hard impact. We had many tasks to complete during our 2.5-hour moonwalk. We collected rock and soil samples, took photographs, conducted experiments, and planted an American flag. Getting the flag to stand upright was actually quite challenging because there was no atmosphere to keep it extended. We had to be careful to ensure it appeared properly displayed for the cameras. One of the most memorable moments was when President Nixon called us from the White House. Here we were, standing on another world, talking to the President of the United States via Houston. The significance of that moment, the technological achievement, the political triumph, the human accomplishment, was not lost on either of us. The scientific work was equally important. We deployed the early Apollo scientific equipment package, including a seismometer to detect moonquakes and a laser reflector that scientists could use to measure the precise distance between Earth and Moon. These instruments would continue to provide valuable data long after we left, but perhaps the most profound experience was simply looking up at Earth. There, hanging in the black void of space, was our home planet, a beautiful, fragile blue and white marble. Seeing Earth from the moon puts everything in perspective. All of human history, every war, every achievement, every person who had ever lived, all of it contained on that small, beautiful sphere, suspended in the cosmic darkness. The silence on the moon was absolute. On Earth, there's always ambient sound, wind, birds, insects, traffic. But on the moon, when we weren't speaking, the silence was complete. The only sounds we heard were our own voices in our helmets and the mechanical noises of our life support systems. The lighting was also unlike anything on Earth. With no atmosphere to scatter the sunlight, shadows were absolutely black, while sunlit areas were brilliant white. The contrast was so stark that it was sometimes difficult to see details in shadowed areas, even though they were just a few feet away. As our time on the surface drew to a close, we gathered our samples and prepared to return to Eagle. We had collected about 47 pounds of lunar material, rocks and soil that would be analyzed by scientists for decades to come. Each sample was carefully documented and photographed before being stowed in our collection boxes. The return to Eagle was bittersweet. We were tired, excited, and ready to begin our journey home. But leaving the lunar surface also meant leaving behind a place where only 2 humans had ever walked. We left several items on the moon: the American flag, a plaque reading, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind," and a small package containing medals honoring fallen Soviet cosmonauts and American astronauts. As we settled down to sleep that night on the lunar surface, I reflected on what we had accomplished. We had fulfilled President Kennedy's challenge to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. But more than that, we had proven that with determination, skill, and the coordinated effort of hundreds of thousands of people, humanity could achieve seemingly impossible goals. The landing was just one part of our mission, of course. We still had to successfully launch from the lunar surface, rendezvous with Mike Collins in Colombia, and make the 3-day journey back to Earth. But lying there in Eagle, surrounded by the absolute silence of the moon, I knew that we had already made history. I often get asked about how it felt to be the first person to walk on the moon. The truth is, while I was honored to be chosen for this role, I have always felt that this achievement belonged to all the people who made it possible. The engineers, scientists, technicians, administrators, and countless others who worked tirelessly to make the impossible possible. The moon landing was not the achievement of any one person, but rather the culmination of the greatest peacetime technological effort in human history. Every person who tightened a bolt, wrote a line of code, solved an engineering problem, or supported the program in any way was part of this achievement. Looking back more than 50 years later, I am still amazed by what we accomplished. With computers less powerful than today's calculators, we navigated across 250,000 miles of space, landed on another world, explored its surface, and returned safely to Earth. It stands as a testament to what humans can achieve when we work together toward a common goal. The moon landing changed not just how we see ourselves as a species, but how we see our place in the universe. We are no longer confined to a single world. We have taken our first steps into the cosmos, and those steps on the dusty lunar surface in the Sea of Tranquility mark the beginning of humanity's journey to the stars.